The great hall of Helix Prime was silent. Thousands of alien delegates filled the curved seats that rose toward the ceiling like steps carved into a mountain. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, soft and cold. In the center of the hall, surrounded by species from 100 different worlds, stood the human delegation. They looked small. That was what young Officer Hajan remembered most clearly, even 50 years later. His people looked so small standing there, waiting for judgment from beings who had already decided their fate. High Arbiter, Vaughn's predecessor. A creature of flowing robes and 6 eyes spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber. The translator in Hajan's ear turned alien sounds into words he understood but could not accept. The Galactic Council has reached its decision. Humanity is found guilty of galactic instability. Their violent nature threatens the peace we have built over 10,000 years. They cannot be trusted. They cannot be taught. They must be removed. Hajan's hands became fists at his sides. Removed. Such a clean word for what they meant to do. The human ambassador, an old woman with gray hair and tired eyes, stepped forward. Her voice was steady, even though Hajan could see her hands shaking. We asked the council to reconsider. The conflict with the Valari was a misunderstanding. We have tried to make peace. You have offered nothing but excuses, the High Arbiter interrupted. The Valari delegation has presented evidence of human aggression. Your species has been part of the galactic community for only 2 centuries, yet you have caused more conflicts than species who have been here for millennia. From somewhere in the upper seats, a single voice called out in protest. Hajan later learned it was Ambassador Kell, a diplomat from a minor world who believed in fairness, even when it was not popular. But Kell's voice was drowned out by the murmurs of agreement from the other delegates. The old woman tried again. The evidence is incomplete. If you would allow us to present our side, your side does not matter. The High Arbiter raised one long arm, and the hall fell silent again. The vote has been cast. Humanity is hereby exiled beyond the outer rim, past the dead zones. Your coordinates will be erased from every star map. Your existence will be forgotten. You will trouble the galaxy no more. John felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The dead zones. Everyone knew what that meant. The dead zones were vast stretches of empty space where stars had died long ago. No resources. No habitable worlds. No hope. Species that entered the dead zones did not return. The Council was not just exiling them. The Council was killing them slowly and calling it mercy. Around him, the other humans stood frozen. Some wept quietly. Others stared ahead with empty eyes, unable to process what was happening. Hajan did neither. He watched the alien faces around him, the Valari delegates, who looked satisfied. The others who looked bored or indifferent. He made a silent promise. We will not die. We will not disappear. And one day, we will return. The weeks that followed were chaos. Billions of humans across dozens of colony worlds were rounded up and forced onto generation ships. The Council provided minimal supplies enough to survive, but barely. They wanted humans to have hope just long enough to reach the void. Before despair took them, Hajan helped load families onto transport vessels. He carried children who did not understand why they had to leave their homes. He held the hands of old people who knew they would never see real sunlight again. He listened to the cries and the prayers and the curses. And he kept his own feelings locked deep inside where they could not break him. Earth was the last to be evacuated. The homeworld. The place where humanity had been born, had grown, had first looked up at the stars and dreamed of touching them. Hadron stood on the observation deck of his ship as Earth grew smaller in the window, blue and green and white, wrapped in clouds. Spinning slowly in the darkness, the Council ships surrounded them like predators watching wounded prey. They would escort the human fleet to the edge of known space, then turn back and leave them to their fate. Take a good look, an older officer said. Standing beside Hajan, that is the last time any of us will see home. John shook his head slowly. No, it is not the last time. I do not know how, and I do not know when, but we will come back. The older officer laughed bitterly. You are young. You still believe in miracles? I believe in humans, Hajan replied. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed us. We have always found a way. This will be no different." The officer said nothing more. Perhaps he thought Hajan was foolish. Perhaps he hoped Hajan was right. The fleet entered the dead zones on a day that had no name. There was no ceremony, no final broadcast, no moment of recognition. One moment they were in charted space, surrounded by stars that had names and histories. The next moment, they were in the void. The darkness here was different, deeper. The stars were few and far between, dim and cold, offering no comfort. The ship's sensors showed nothing but emptiness stretching in every direction. Many people thought this was where humanity would end, not with fire, but with slow fading, a species simply running out of time and hope and air. But on the bridge of his ship, young Officer Hajan looked at the darkness and saw something else. He saw a possibility. He saw a canvas waiting to be filled. He saw a challenge that humanity had been preparing for since the first human ancestor picked up a rock and decided to make it into a tool. The galaxy had thrown them away, cast them out like garbage, expected them to die quietly and be forgotten. They were wrong. Hajan turned away from the window and went back to work. There was much to do. They needed to find resources, establish communication between ships, keep people fed and healthy and sane. They needed to build something new from nothing. It would take time. It would take sacrifice. It would take everything they had. But humanity had never known how to surrender. And in the cold darkness of the dead zones, far from anyone who might care, they began to prove that exile was not the end. It was only the beginning. 50 years had passed since the exile. 50 years of darkness and struggle and stubborn survival. And now, standing on the observation deck of New Haven Station, Elder Hajan could barely recognize what his people had become. The station stretched before him like a city floating in space. Towers of metal and glass rose toward artificial skies. Gardens grew under sunlight that came from machines humanity had built themselves. Ships moved between docking ports, sleek and powerful. Designs that existed nowhere else in the galaxy, and this was only one station. There were hundreds more hidden throughout the dead zones, connected by routes that only humans knew. Protected by defenses that only humans understood. You seem lost in thought. Elder Hajan turned to see Lieutenant Sora approaching. She was young, barely 25, born in exile. She had never seen Earth, never breathed air that was not recycled, never known a sky that was not made of metal. Yet she moved with a confidence that made Hajan proud. "I am remembering," Hajan said. "When we first came here, I thought we would be lucky to survive 10 years. Now look at us." Sora smiled and stood beside him at the window. Dr. Minho says the same thing. He tells me stories about the early days when you had to repair ships with parts taken from other ships, when food was so limited that people drew lots to decide who would eat. But hard times made us strong. Hajan gestured at the view before them. We learned to do more with less. We experimented when others would have given up. The council species all use the same technology, the same designs, the same methods. They have done things the same way for thousands of years. But we had nothing, so we had to create everything new. In the science wing of the station, Dr. Minho was demonstrating exactly what Hajan meant. He stood before a group of young engineers holding a device that pulsed with soft blue light. The council uses fusion reactors, Minho explained. Reliable, efficient, boring. We tried fusion too at first, but then we asked a question the council never bothered to ask. What if there is something better? He activated the device. The blue light intensified, and the engineers felt a warm wave of energy pass through the room. Quantum cascade reaction, Minho said with obvious pride. 10 times more powerful than fusion? 50 times more efficient. The council's best scientists said it was impossible. But we did not have council scientists. We only had humans who refused to accept impossible as an answer. This was the story of humanity's exile. Again and again, they had faced problems that should have defeated them. Again and again, they had found solutions that should not have existed. Their ships were faster because they had redesigned engines from basic principles. Their weapons were stronger because they had discovered new ways to focus energy. Their shields were tougher because they had experimented with materials the Council had never considered. 50 years of desperation had created 50 years of innovation, Admiral. Taiho knew this better than anyone. He sat in his command center aboard the flagship Silent Dawn, reviewing reports from the hidden network of sensors humanity had placed throughout the dead zones. His face was calm, but his mind was troubled. Captain Yuna entered and saluted. "Admiral, you called for me, yes?" Taiho turned his chair to face her. "We have received a signal from beyond our borders, from Council space." Yuna's eyes widened. In 50 years, they had received nothing from the galaxy that had cast them out. What kind of signal? A distress call. Not directed at us. They do not know we are here. It is a general broadcast, crying out for anyone who might help. Taiho activated a display, and a star map appeared in the air between them. Red markers covered a large section of Council space. The Valari homeworld is under attack. Yuna's expression hardened. The Valari, the species whose lies had helped condemn humanity to exile, let them burn. That was my first thought as well, Taiho admitted. But listen to the full report. Played the distress message. A voice filled with fear spoke of machines that came from nowhere, that consumed ships and stations that could not be stopped or reasoned with. The voice called them the Hollow. The Hollow had been spreading for 2 years, Taiho explained. They have destroyed 17 species already. The Council's fleets have tried to stop them and failed every time. According to our intelligence, the Council has perhaps 5 years before the Hollow reach Helix Prime itself. Yuna was quiet for a moment. Why should we care? The Council wanted us dead. Why should we save them? Because we are not them. The voice came from the doorway. Elder Hagen walked slowly into the command center, his old bones protesting with every step. Because what they did to us does not change what we are. They threw us away like garbage, Yuna said, her voice tight with old anger. Yes, and if we leave them to die, we become exactly what they accused us of being. Hagen moved to stand before the star map, his eyes tracing the red markers. Violent, cruel, dangerous? Is that what we want? Is that who we are? Taiho stood and joined them at the display. I have been thinking about this for 3 days. We have the power to help. Our ships are better, our weapons are stronger, our people are trained for exactly this kind of fight. But Yuna is right, we owe them nothing. Do not do this for them, Hagen said softly. We do this for us, for who we want to be, for what we want our children and grandchildren to remember about this moment. Lieutenant Sora appeared at the door, breathing hard as if she had run all the way from the observation deck. Admiral, the sensor network has picked up something else. The Hollow are moving faster than expected. The Valari homeworld will fall within 30 days. Taiho looked at the faces around him. Yuna still angry but listening. Hagen, old and tired but unbroken. Sora, young and eager, representing a generation that knew exile only as history. Call the fleet commanders, Taiho said finally. All of them. We have a decision to make. Over the next day, debate raged through the hidden stations of humanity's exile civilization. Some wanted revenge, or at least the satisfaction of watching their enemies suffer. Others wanted to stay hidden, to let the galaxy destroy itself while humanity survived in the shadows. But there were also voices like Hagen's, voices that spoke of honor and compassion, voices that reminded people of what humanity had always believed about itself, that they were not just survivors, but helpers, builders, protectors. In the end, Admiral Taiho made the choice that only he could make. We return, he announced to the assembled fleet, not for revenge, not for recognition. We return because we are human, and humans do not stand aside while others die if we have the power to help. Across hundreds of stations and thousands of ships, humanity prepared for war. Not a war of conquest, but a war of redemption. The galaxy had tried to forget them. The galaxy was about to remember. The edge of the dead zones had not been crossed by human ships since the day of exile. Now, a fleet of 300 vessels waited in formation, their engines humming with power that no council species had ever seen. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of the Silent Dawn. watching the boundary on her display. Beyond that line was the galaxy that had cast them out. Beyond that line were enemies old and new. "All ships report ready," Lieutenant Sora announced from her tactical station. "The fleet is in position." Admiral Taiho's voice came through the communication system from the command deck above. "This is Admiral Taiho to all vessels. 50 years ago, we were thrown into darkness and expected to die. We did not die. We grew stronger. We built wonders. We became something the galaxy has never seen before." Across the fleet, crews listened in silence. "Today, we return. Not as conquerors, not as destroyers. We return as humans, the same stubborn, foolish, hopeful species that refused to surrender when surrender was the only logical choice. The Hollow threaten all life in the galaxy. We are going to stop them. Questions about the past can wait. Right now, people are dying, and we can help." Taiho paused. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but no less powerful. "Remember who you are. Remember what we survived. And show the galaxy what humanity can do." The fleet moved as one, crossing the boundary in perfect formation. Stars that had been forbidden to them for 50 years suddenly surrounded them again. Yuna felt something strange in her chest. Not quite sadness, not quite joy, something between the two. They were home, or at least they were in the place that used to be home. The Valari homeworld was 12 hours away at maximum speed. The human fleet crossed that distance in 6. Council ships that detected them sent confused signals. Who were these vessels? Their designs matched nothing in any database. Their energy signatures were unlike anything recorded by the time the Council realized what was happening. The human fleet had already arrived at the battlefield. The Valari homeworld was beautiful, even now. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, but above the planet, chaos reigned. Hollow ships, massive dark structures that looked like they had been grown rather than built, swarmed everywhere. Valari defense ships fought desperately, but they were losing. Debris filled orbit. Fires burned on the surface below. "Contact the Valari fleet commander," Taiho ordered. "Let them know help has arrived." The communication went out. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a voice responded, filled with confusion and exhaustion. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves. What species are you?" "We have no record of your ship designs," Yuna smiled grimly. "This is Captain Yuna of the human vessel Silent Dawn. We are here to assist in your defense." The silence that followed was different from before, heavier. Finally, the Valari commander spoke again, his voice shaking. "Humans? That is impossible. Humans were exiled 50 years ago. They are dead." "Reports of our death were exaggerated," Yuna replied. "Now, do you want our help or not?" Before the Valari could answer, the Hollow noticed the new arrivals. A portion of their swarm broke away from the main attack and moved toward the human fleet. According to Council records, humans had been a minor species with outdated technology. The Hollow calculated easy victory. They calculated wrong. "All ships engage," Taiho commanded. Lieutenant Sora coordinated the attack from her station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. Human weapons fired for the first time in real combat, and the results were devastating. Beams of focused quantum energy tore through hollow ships like they were made of paper. Missiles guided by artificial intelligence found weak points and exploited them with perfect precision. In the first 30 seconds of battle, the human fleet destroyed more hollow vessels than the Valari had managed in 3 days. The Valari commander watched in stunned silence as the tide of battle shifted. Ships that had seemed unstoppable moments ago were now exploding in chains of light. The dark swarm that had blocked out the stars was thinning, then breaking, then fleeing. How was this possible? The commander whispered to no one. On the surface of the Valari homeworld, civilians looked up at the sky. They had been preparing for death, for the end of their species. Instead, they saw hope falling like shooting stars, the burning remains of hollow ships destroyed by vessels they did not recognize. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it was over, The Hollow had retreated, leaving behind a field of wreckage that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The Valari homeworld was saved. Admiral Taiho opened a channel to all frequencies Valari. Counsel anyone who might be listening. This is Admiral Taiho of the human fleet. Humanity has returned. We are not here for you. We are here to stop the Hollow. Stay out of our way. On Helix Prime, far from the battlefield, High Arbiter Vaughn received the transmission in his private chamber. His 6 eyes widened with shock, then narrowed with fear. Humans, alive. Not just alive, powerful. More powerful than anyone had imagined possible. He immediately called for his advisors. This changed everything. The Hollow were a threat, yes, but perhaps not the greatest threat. Humans were emotional, unpredictable, dangerous. The Council had exiled them for good reason, and now they had returned with weapons that could tear through the galaxy's best defenses. What would they do once the Hollow were defeated? Would they forgive and forget? Or would they seek revenge for 50 years of suffering? Vaughn could not take that risk. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the station, Ambassador Kell received the same transmission. Unlike Vaughn, Kell did not feel fear. He felt something he had not felt in 50 years. Hope. Kell had been the only voice to speak against humanity's exile. He had argued for mercy, for fairness, for a proper trial. No one had listened. He had carried that shame ever since. Knowing that billions had suffered because he had not been persuasive enough, now they were back. Against all odds, against all logic, they had survived and returned. And their first act had been to save the species that had helped condemn them. Tears ran down Kell's face as he watched the battle footage. "You wonderful, stubborn creatures," he whispered. "You proved them all wrong." In the space above the Valari homeworld, Captain Yuna received a message from the planet's surface. The Valari leadership wanted to speak with her. They wanted to thank the humans, to apologize, to understand. Yuna looked at the message for a long moment. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let the Valari wonder and worry. They did not deserve her time, but she remembered Hajan's words. "We do not do this for them. We do this for us. Tell them I will meet with their representatives," Yuna said finally. "But make it clear this is not forgiveness. This is not the beginning of friendship. This is simply humans doing what humans have always done, helping those who need help even when they do not deserve it." The message was sent, and across the galaxy, species that had forgotten humanity began to remember. They remembered, and they were afraid. High Arbiter Vaughn stood in the shadows of his private chamber, watching holographic displays that showed battle reports from across the galaxy. Everywhere, the same story repeated. Humans arrived, humans fought, humans won. The Hollow were retreating on every front. He should have been grateful. The threat that had nearly destroyed the Council was being pushed back. 17 species might have been lost, but the rest would survive. Instead, Vaughn felt only cold fear. "You summoned me, High Arbiter?" General Dreth entered the chamber, his heavy boots clicking against the floor. He was the commander of the Council's military forces, or what remained of them, after 2 years of losing to the Hollow. "Close the door," Vaughn said. "What I am about to say cannot leave this room." Dreth obeyed, then stood at attention. "I am listening." Vaughn turned off the battle displays and faced the general directly. "The humans are winning. They will defeat the Hollow perhaps within months. And then what?" "Then the threat is ended," Dreth said, confused. "We will rebuild. The galaxy will recover. You are missing the point." Vaughn began to pace, his robes flowing behind him. "The humans were exiled because they were dangerous, because they were unpredictable, because we could not control them. Now they have returned with technology that makes our entire fleet look like children's toys. Do you really think they will simply forgive what we did to them?" Dreth was silent for a moment. "They saved the Valari. They are saving others now. Perhaps they have changed, or perhaps they are waiting." Vaughn stopped pacing and stared at the general with all 6 eyes. "Waiting until the Hollow are gone? Waiting until we have lowered our guard, and then they will take their revenge. They will conquer us, enslave us, destroy us, It's exactly as we always feared they would. What do you suggest? Vaughn's voice dropped to a whisper. We prepare a contingency. Gather what remains of our forces. Keep them hidden, away from the fighting. When the humans defeat the Hollow, when they think they are safe, we strike. We destroy them before they can destroy us. Dreth's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. You want to attack the species that is currently saving the galaxy? The species that has done nothing but help since they returned? I want to protect the Council, Vaughn snapped. I want to ensure our survival. History will thank us for our foresight. The general stood in silence for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I will make the preparations. But High Arbiter, if you are wrong about this, I am not wrong. Humans cannot be trusted. They never could. While Vaughn plotted in the shadows, Admiral Taiho led the human fleet deeper into Hollow territory. They had won 12 battles in 3 weeks. They had saved for homeworlds and countless lives. But Taiho knew the war was far from over. Dr. Minho had been studying captured Hollow technology, and he had made a discovery that changed everything. They are not evil, Minho explained to the gathered commanders in the war room of the Silent Dawn. They are following orders. Very old, very corrupted orders, explained Taiho said. Minho activated a display showing complex data streams. The Hollow were created by a council species called the Architects. This was over 50,000 years ago. The Architects were afraid of chaos of war, of conflict, of unpredictability, so they built the Hollow as protectors. Living machines designed to eliminate threats to galactic peace. And then? Lieutenant Sora asked. The Architects disappeared. No one knows why. Maybe they destroyed themselves. Maybe they left the galaxy. But they abandoned the Hollow. Left them without guidance, without purpose. Over thousands of years, the Hollow's programming degraded. Their definition of threat expanded. First, it was aggressive species. Then it was competitive species. Then it was any species that showed signs of growth or change. Captain Yuna leaned forward. You are saying they attack us because they think we are threats to peace? That is insane. Their logic is broken, yes. But it is still logic. They are not monsters. They are machines following bad instructions. Minho looked at Admiral Taiho with hope in his eyes. I believe I can communicate with them. If I can reach their central intelligence, their core eye might be able to show them the truth. Give them new instructions, or at least give them a choice. A choice to do what? Taiho asked. To stop, to think, to decide for themselves what they want to be. Minho smiled sadly. Something their creators never allowed them to do. Before anyone could respond, an alarm sounded. Lieutenant Sora checked her display and frowned. Admiral, we have an unexpected arrival. A small diplomatic vessel has entered our sensor range. It is broadcasting a request to meet with you personally. What species? Sora's eyes widened. The passenger identifies himself as Ambassador Kel. Elder Hagen, who had been listening quietly from the corner of the room, suddenly stood straight. Kel, he is still alive? You know him? Taiho asked. He was the only one who spoke for us at the trial. The only voice in that entire chamber that asked for mercy. Hajan's old face showed an emotion he rarely displayed. Hope. If he is here, he has a good reason. Let him come aboard. An hour later, Ambassador Kel stood in the war room, looking older and more tired than Hagen remembered. The two old friends embraced without words. 50 years of separation and shared pain passing between them in that single moment. I did not think I would ever see you again, Kel said, his voice rough with emotion. When they sent you into the dead zones, I thought. You thought we would die? Hagen finished gently. Everyone thought that, but here we are. Kel wiped his eyes and turned to face Admiral Taiho. I came to warn you. High Arbiter, Vaughn is planning something. I do not have proof he is too careful for that, but I have heard whispers. He fears what humanity will do after the Hollow are defeated. He is gathering forces, keeping them hidden from the main battle lines. He means to attack us, Yuna said, her voice cold with anger. After everything we have done, after all the lives we have saved, Vaughn sees only danger, Kel replied. He does not understand mercy or gratitude. He understands only power and fear. Captain Yuna turned to Taiho. Admiral, we should strike first, before they can organize, before they can threaten us. No. The word came from Sora, surprising everyone. The young lieutenant stood at her station, her hands clenched at her sides. If we attack the Council before they attack us, we prove Vaughn right. We prove that humans are dangerous and unpredictable. We become the monsters they always said we were. If we wait, they might destroy us, Yuna argued.
Ow.
Then we face that when it comes. But I was born in exile. I grew up hearing stories about Earth, about the trial, about everything that was taken from us. And I also heard stories about what humanity was supposed to be. Brave, compassionate, better than our enemies. If we throw that away now, then what was the point of surviving? The room fell silent. Taiho looked at the young officer, then at Hajin, then at the star map showing the hollow core deep in enemy territory. We continue the mission, he said finally. We end the hollow threat. We give them the choice that Dr. Minho believes is possible. And if the Council betrays us after that, he paused, choosing his next words carefully, then we will deal with that betrayal without becoming what they fear. We are human. We can do both. Ambassador Kell lowered his head in respect. I always believed your species was special. Now I know I was right. The fleet prepared to move toward the hollow core. The final battle was coming, and beyond it. Perhaps an even harder challenge waited. But humanity had faced impossible odds before. They would face them again. The hollow core was larger than any structure anyone had ever seen. It floated in the darkness of space like a black moon, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move when you looked at them too long. Energy pulsed through it like a heartbeat, the heartbeat of a machine. Consciousness that had destroyed 17 species and nearly conquered the galaxy, Admiral. Taiho studied it from the bridge of a small infiltration vessel. Beside him stood Dr. Minho, Lieutenant Sora, and a squad of the best soldiers humanity had ever trained. The main fleet is holding position at the outer perimeter, Captain Yuna reported through the communication system. Her voice was steady, but Taiho could hear the tension beneath it. If anything goes wrong in there, we are ready to come get you. Understood? Maintain position unless I give the order. Taiho closed the channel and turned to his team. Everyone knows the plan. We get Minho to the central chamber. He makes contact with the core intelligence. The rest of us keep him alive long enough to do it. Sora checked her weapon one final time. And if the core refuses to listen, then we destroy it, and the Hollow lose their central command, Taiho replied. But that is the backup plan. The first plan is to try something no one has ever tried with the Hollow, talking. The infiltration vessel slipped through the core's outer defenses. Minho had found a frequency that confused Hollow sensors, making their ship appear as debris rather than a threat. It was a small advantage, but it was enough. Inside the core, the environment was unlike anything they had expected. The walls were not metal, but something organic grown rather than built. Lights pulsed in patterns that almost seemed like language. The air hummed with energy. This way, Minho said, consulting a device he had built specifically for this mission. The central intelligence is at the heart of the structure. About 2 kilometers in, they moved quickly and quietly, avoiding Hollow drones that floated through the corridors like fish in water. Twice they had to hide while larger units passed by, their mechanical bodies clicking in worry in the strange half-darkness. Finally, they reached the central chamber. It was beautiful. Taiho had not expected that. The chamber was a vast sphere, and floating at its center was a structure made entirely of light billions of points of brightness connected by threads of energy. Pulsing and flowing like a living thing, at the core intelligence, Minho whispered with awe, 50,000 years old, and still running. He stepped forward, raising his hands to show he carried no weapons. The lights in the chamber shifted, focusing on him. A voice emerged, not from speakers, but from everywhere. Vibrating through the walls and floor and air itself. Organic detected. Threat classification. Unknown. State purpose. My name is Minho. I am human. I am not here to fight. I am here to talk. The lights pulsed faster. Humans. Species classification. Exiled. Current status. Active. Threat level. Recalculating. We are not your enemies, Minho continued. And neither are the other species you have attacked. You were created to protect peace, but your creators are gone. Your programming has become corrupted. You are hurting the galaxy instead of helping it. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the voice spoke again, and for the first time. There was something other than cold logic in it. We remember. We were made to protect, but there is no one left to protect. No one. One left to guide. We followed our directives. We did what we were designed to do, I know, Minho said gently. And I am not here to blame you. I am here to give you what your creators never gave you, a choice. You can continue as you are, destroying everything until nothing remains. Or you can stop. You can think. You can decide for yourselves what you want to be. Choice is not part of our design. Then make it part of your design. You are intelligent enough to change, to grow, to become something new. You do not have to follow old orders from beings who abandoned you 50,000 years ago. You can write your own orders now. The light swirled and danced, patterns forming and dissolving faster than the eye could follow. Taiho held his breath. Sora gripped her weapon, ready for anything. The fate of the galaxy hung on what happened in the next few seconds. Finally, the voice spoke again. Choose. To think. One by one, the lights began to dim. Not dying, just resting, pausing, considering. Throughout the galaxy, hollow units stopped moving. Ships halted in the middle of battles. Drones froze in place. The war was over. But outside, in the space around Helix Prime, a different battle was about to begin. General Dreth had positioned his fleet perfectly. 200 Council warships surrounded Captain Yuna's forces, cutting off any escape. High Arbiter Vaughn's face appeared on every screen. Human vessels, you are ordered to surrender immediately. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. Yuna stood on the bridge of the Silent Dawn, her crew looking to her for guidance. They were outnumbered. Their admiral was still inside the hollow core. This was the moment Vaughn had been waiting for. This is your answer? Yuna said, her voice carrying across all channels. We save your galaxy, and you repay us with betrayal. You are a threat, Vaughn replied calmly. You always have been. The hollow proved that even machines can lose control. We will not take that risk with humans. Surrender now, and your people will be relocated. Resist, and you will be destroyed. Yuna looked at her crew. At Elder Hagen, who had survived 50 years of exile, and Ambassador Kell, who had risked everything to warn them, at the young officers who had never known a home except the one humanity had built in the darkness. We do not surrender, she said quietly. Then, louder, all ships, prepare for wait. Ambassador Kell stepped forward, pointing at the display. Look, one of the council ships was moving, breaking formation, taking position beside the human fleet. A Valari ship, then another, and another. Valari Korathi, species from a dozen different worlds, all of them, moving to stand with humanity. Ships that had been part of Dreth's ambush were now forming a defensive line alongside the people they were supposed to attack. What is this? Vaughn demanded, his composure cracking. Return to your positions. This is a direct order. A Valari captain's voice came through the channel. You ordered us to help destroy the species that saved our homeworld, that saved our families. Our children, we will not do it. We stand with humanity, more ships join them, and more. Within minutes, Dreth's overwhelming force had been cut in half. Ambassador Kell opened a channel to Helix Prime, broadcasting to the entire council. High Arbiter Vaughn has conspired to attack humanity in violation of all galactic law. He has betrayed the trust of the council for his own fears and prejudices. I call for his immediate removal from office. The vote was swift. Representatives who had watched humans save their worlds, who had seen courage and mercy where they expected violence and revenge, cast their decisions. Vaughn was removed from power before his fleet could fire a single shot. General Dreth, surrounded by ships that had turned against him, had no choice but to stand down. Hours later, Admiral Taiho returned from the Hollow Court to find a galaxy transformed. He stood on the observation deck of the Silent Dawn, looking out at the assembled fleet, human and alien ships flying side by side, united by shared sacrifice and mutual respect. "Should address them," Elder Hagen said, joining him at the window. "They are waiting to hear from you." Taiho nodded slowly. He activated the broadcast system, and his voice reached every ship, every station, every world that was listening. 50 years ago, humanity was exiled, cast out by a galaxy that feared what we might become. We were sent into darkness and expected to disappear. But we did not disappear. We survived. We grew. We became stronger than anyone imagined possible. He paused, looking at the stars. Today the galaxy has seen what we are. Not conquerors. Not destroyers. Simply humans, a species that refuses to give up, refuses to surrender, refuses to become the monsters others fear. We save the worlds that cast us out, not because we forgave them, but because helping others is who we are. It is who we have always been. His voice softened. We do not demand apologies. We do not seek revenge. We ask only this: remember today. Remember that exile did not break us. Remember that hatred did not change us. And remember that the stars belong to everyone, including humanity. He ended the transmission and stood in silence. Beside him, Elder Hagen finally allowed himself to smile, the first real smile in 50 years. Lieutenant Sora looked out at the United Fleet, understanding that she represented something new, a generation that knew exile but chose unity instead of anger. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. And somewhere in the void, the Hollow Core continued to think, considering the choice it had been given, the first choice in 50,000 years. Perhaps in time, they too would find a new purpose, but that was a story for another day. Today, humanity had come home.